This is episode 29 of the Relentless Man podcast, Tao Te Ching, part 4. Hi, and welcome to the Relentless Man podcast. I'm your host, Christian Mojaiso, and my goal is to help men die empty, to make sure that you die having used up every ounce of potential that is trapped within you. However, to help you die empty, I'll have to be very raw and brutally honest with you. So if you're easily offended, stop listening. If you're easily triggered, stop listening. If you can't handle explicit language, stop listening. If you are fragile, stop listening. Otherwise, let's dig in. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to urge you not to blindly copy or implement anything that I say in this podcast episode. Rather, what I recommend is that you turn on your brain, that you think for yourself, and that you make sure that the decisions that you make are the product of your own thinking and decision-making process. Remember, do not be a follower, be a student. So this is, as I mentioned at the beginning of this is the fourth part of our series on the Tao Te Ching. Now, the Tao Te Ching is a text that was written through an enlightened master called Lao Tzu. At least that's the official story. And this text, the Tao Te Ching, covers basically all the important aspects of life: learning, how to think, emotions, how to be in the moment, how to lead, how to teach, almost all the important spheres of life. In fact, from my own perspective, if one were to master and live in accordance with all the principles in the Tao Te Ching, one would have mastered life itself. So, natural question, if you haven't been, let's say, following the series, you might be wondering, well, Christian, why are we doing the Tao Te Ching? Why is it so important to me? Well, this podcast is dedicated towards helping you realize your true potential, helping you to die empty. And in order for you to die empty, it's important for you to realize your spiritual potential. So you may not be buying into the ideas of spirituality at the moment. I'm not talking about religion and going to church. Perhaps you don't believe in spiritual ideas. That's perfectly fine. It will come with time. Just if you follow the process, if you really push to your limit, you'll realize that the spiritual dimension is very important. But in case you don't buy that yet, following this episode, in particular, following these ideas are useful just on a practical level. They will enable you to do a much better job at whatever it is that you're doing. But the greatest importance of this work, the Tao Te Ching, is that it enables you to answer a fundamental question. The question, who am I? Because once you know who you are, then everything flows from there. And in fact, you'll never be able to die empty. You'll never be able to realize your true potential until you realize who you are. Unfortunately, the question, who am I, is a question I cannot answer for you. I cannot tell you who you are. I know who I am. When I discovered it, it was a shock to me, a big revelation. It was also a scary moment. Now, the thing is that I know who I am, but I cannot tell you who I am. That's the thing. Who I am is something that can't be described in words. And that's true about you as well. Nobody can tell you who you are. I can't tell you who you are. All I can hope for is that in this podcast episode, the ideas that I present will spark and stimulate you to discover for yourself who you truly are. And once you discover who you truly are, you basically become unstoppable. All right, so let's continue looking at the Tao Te Ching. So we stopped on the third verse of the Tao Te Ching, and where we stopped was this second stanza of the third verse. It says, "The master leads by emptying people's minds and filling their cores, by weakening their ambition and toughening their resolve. He helps people lose everything they know, everything they desire, and creates confusion in those who think that they know." So we discussed most of the previous parts of it before. The idea was that if you're really relentless, if you're really a master of a skill, when you become really good at whatever it is that you do, you begin to do things that appear miraculous. And in a sense, they are. I don't know if you've ever watched like a great soccer player in action, like let's say the top player in the world plays soccer, and there's something magical about how they play. It's like they're breaking the laws of physics, the things they're able to do with the ball. Or if you just sit down and listen to a great piece of music, there's something transcendent, something very deep and moving about it. And usually when the piece or the work is really good, it leaves you in awe, in shock. And at least for a couple of seconds, you're not thinking. You're completely glued to whatever is happening. You've been amazed and you're completely present. And in that moment, at least, you're really happy. Okay, happiness, at least for a while. And that's what magicians do really well. They perform a trick that appears to bend the laws of physics. You look at it in amazement. Maybe the rabbit disappeared. You're like, how can a rabbit, or Houdini, the magician, apparently was said to have made an elephant disappear in a room. Of course, it was a trick. We hope it was. Yeah, I think it was a trick. But, yeah, that was something that was amazing. People don't expect that to happen. And when he performed this trick, of course, people at the moment who watched it were in awe and surprise and shock. And at least for that second, they stopped thinking. At least for that second, they were completely glued to the present moment, not distracted, not thinking about the future or the past. And so they had a moment of happiness, at least a moment of wonder. And they realized in that moment that they don't know everything. And that's what the master does. That's what if you're not doing it now, you're going to begin to do. When you truly pursue the process, of pushing to the limit, of realizing your true potential, what's going to begin to happen is that you're going to begin to, at least with your craft, whatever your craft will be, you're going to begin to do things that are just in skill level above what most people can do. The end result is that the work will be amazing. And the end result is that you have people in awe, and in particular, even people who have this belief of how things are will begin to doubt for a moment. You'll help people to realize that those who think that they know how things work, you begin to have them question. You'll create some doubt in their minds. And that is part of what the master does, and that's actually an important lesson for a relentless man, because in order to perform at the highest level, in order to push your potential, you're going to have to do things that even to you at the moment seem impossible. Before doing them seem impossible to you. But in order to do impossible things, you'll have to think in an impossible way. You'll have to doubt, and you'll have to break certain rules, break certain conventions. And in particular, what that means is that you'll have to doubt what's possible. And that's the beginning. That's the space from which great work is created. It's the space of doubt, where you doubt, you challenge what is possible. And in order to do that, you can't be dogmatic. You can't just believe or think that you know everything. You know how things are. Because once you think that you know how things are, creativity dies and you're unable to do and create the impossible. And in particular, you also want to get to the point. Remember, we said a relentless man is a leader. When you begin to challenge the impossible, you'll also get other people to challenge their own notion of the impossible. And you'll get other people to begin to doubt what they think that they know, thereby opening up their minds to new possibilities. And this is the height of mastery. It's a really beautiful experience when you do something that people believe to be impossible. Let's move on to the next stanza of the third verse. It says, practice not doing, and everything will fall into place. What does that mean? Practicing not doing. So if you don't do anything, are things going to collapse? Right? That's kind of contrary. We're usually told that if you want things to work, if you want things to happen in your life, you have to do things. You have to act. You have to take action. But now Lao Tzu is saying the opposite. It's like, no, don't do anything. When you don't do anything is when things fall into place. This feels like a paradox. What does it really mean? Here, by not doing anything, it doesn't literally mean not doing anything. Rather, what Lao Tzu here is talking about is working in accordance with the nature of things. For instance, imagine someone who is in a river, and let's say the river is flowing downstream. Now, if you allow yourself to go down, if you move downstream with the river, well, you appear to be doing nothing. All you did was you sat in the river, and the force, because the river was going downstream, it took you downstream. Now imagine if you're struggling against the river. The river is going downstream, you're trying to go upstream. Now, you're struggling a lot, you're using a lot of effort, you're doing a lot. But the end result is that you're not in harmony with how the river is flowing. And the end result is you don't get to where you need to go, or you get there with unnecessary effort. And that's a sign of lack of mastery. Well, that's kind of what Lao Tzu is talking about here is whatever it is that you're trying to do. If you're some sort of artist, perhaps you're a musician, perhaps you're a dancer, perhaps you're a scientist, whatever it is that you're trying to do, there are laws that govern that thing. If you work in accordance with the laws, if you work in accordance with the nature of things, then you appear to not be doing anything. In fact, in a sense, you're not doing anything. You're being done. Just like the person who's moving downstream is not moving downstream. The river is moving him downstream. He's being moved. In the same way, when you work in accordance with the laws act upon you. So you're not doing anything. You're being done. And Lao Tzu is saying that once you work in accordance with how things are, once you're able to perform whatever it is that you do with minimal effort, then you reach a point where things just fall into place. Things work in harmony. And that's the height of mastery. That's the height of really being good and being relentless at something. And that's what he's saying here, that practice not doing and everything will fall into place. If you struggle, if you're not nuanced and you're always working against or contrary to the laws of how things function, well then things don't work out as well as they could. You're always struggling and there's a lack of harmony. And that's why, again, if you look at any great performer, any musician, any great scientist, like great scientific theory, or you look at a great piano player, usually what you discover is that they don't appear to be doing anything. They just do things with so much ease, with minimal effort, and there seems to be a harmony about everything that they do. And that's because they've mastered this principle of not doing anything and allowing things to fall into place. All right, let's move on to the fourth verse of the Tao Te Ching. It says, "The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities." Okay, so what is the Tao? That's the thing, right? That was the first verse we looked at. The Tao, because we're saying the Tao is like a well. What is the Tao? That's the thing. The Tao is something that you can't really describe. The Tao is, you could maybe you talk about maybe some manifestations of it, and it's something that cannot be described. Once you talk about it, once you try to define it clearly, that's a sure sign that you don't understand it. It's something that's basically ungraspable. But one manifestation of the Tao is that it's the force that animates life. That's one thing. For instance, the fact that you're able to move and think and do things is because the life force, the Tao, is working within you. That's why when someone dies, I don't know if you've ever touched a dead body before, but if you have, you'll realize that there's, you notice, or just looking at a dead body, you notice that there is no life in that body anymore. Something key is missing. There's no life anymore. And that's the life force is gone. The Tao is not acting through that body anymore. And of course, that's not, now you might say, oh, so the Tao is a life force. And that's not necessarily correct, because the Tao is also just darkness. Right? It's the void. It's, you could think of the Tao as infinite intelligence. You could think of the Tao as infinite strength, infinite creativity, infinite courage. You could think of the Tao as the purest form of love. You could think of the Tao as the purest form of beauty. So you see, it's something that you can't really define. It's one of those things, if you really, I guess the closest you can get to really knowing what the Tao is if at this moment, for instance, you just maybe stopped listening and you stayed quiet and didn't think and just observed. That sense that you get, for example, in the second here that we just, that sense that you get when you're not thinking and you're just observing, when you feel at one with everything around you. Well, that's what the Tao is. But you see, you can't really put it into words. But he's saying here is that the Tao is like a well, used but never used up. So, I mean, one aspect of the Tao is just, for instance, it's just, one aspect of the Tao is intelligence, right? So, for instance, if you are really curious about something and you ask a lot of questions about something, you'd think that you'll reach a point where there are just no more questions to ask, or there's nothing left to learn. Let me be more specific here. Let's say you're trying to study a human being, right? There's a human being you're trying to study, and you come and you try to figure out, well, you're trying to learn a new detail about the human being every time you meet them. Maybe you'll learn that, oh wow, they have blonde hair. Or wow, they have really long nails and the nails are maintained. Oh wow, their nose is narrow and long, maybe pointed. Then you'll study, oh wow, their lips, okay, they have red lipstick, etc. Like, if you notice that this process never ends. You can never truly grasp who a human being is. And in particular, the more you try to learn something new about someone, the more new things there are to learn. That's one of the remarkable facts. You'd think that if you kept learning something new about somebody every single day, you reach a point where you've learned everything and there's nothing to learn about that person. But of course, that's not true. In fact, in a sense, the more you try to learn about a person, the more you discover there is to learn. For instance, the more curious you are about something, the more things you find to be curious about. For instance, or let's say, you could think of courage. People like to think of courage as like maybe a finite resource. But you see, if you're courageous, you think that there's a limit to how courageous you can be, but that's a delusion. That's not true. If you're courageous in one moment, you gain the capacity to be even more courageous. And the more courage you draw on, the more courage there is to draw on. That's the concept here. And that's the same thing with creativity as well. If you try to think differently about something, you'd think that you'll reach a point where you can't think anymore, you can't be more creative, but that's not true. The more creativity you draw on, the more creativity there is to draw on. And that's what this part of the stanza is saying, this part of the verse is saying. The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. Right? Think about the void. Maybe you could think about void as a vacuum, but that's just a name. We really have no understanding of what's inside a void. And in fact, you could think of, like, if you have a room and you have, let's say, a table in it, you could think of the table being in the room, or you could think of basically you could think of, if you're in a room and you have a table, well, the table, you could think of the table as being placed in the room, or you could think of the space in the room placing the table. That is, the space around the table is what creates the table. I don't know if that seems a little abstract, but if you think about it, it makes sense. If you have a bottle, it's the space around the bottle is what enables you to observe the bottle. Now think about how many things you can place in a given space, or how many things space can create, or the void can create, and you realize there are infinitely many. How many things can you place in a room? Infinitely many things. How many possibilities are in the void? Infinitely many possibilities, right? So that's what he's saying here, is that the Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. And the void could be space, it could also be just creativity, right? So, in particular, I mean, if you're trying to, as a relentless man, you very likely have a craft. There's something you're trying to become really, really good at. Now, notice what this verse is saying is that there is no limit to how good you can get at what it is that you're trying to do. Let's say you're trying to be a golfer, right? You're trying to become really good at golf. Right? So the more you practice, well, the more you discover things to improve on. You never reach a point where your golf game is so perfect you can't improve on it anymore. If you're trying to become really good at thinking, well, there is no limit to how well you can think. The more you think about how to think better, the more you realize there is a way to think better. There is no limit. That's the sense in which your intelligence is actually, that's what the verse here is saying, is that your intelligence is actually unlimited. Your courage is actually unlimited. Your strength is actually unlimited. Whatever, let's say, if you can lift 50 pounds right now, well, the truth is 50 pounds your limit? No. If you tried really hard, you could lift more than 50 pounds. And whatever that, maybe you lift 60 now. If you tried really hard, you can lift more than 60. And maybe you reach 70. If you tried really hard, you can lift more than 70. Is there truly a limit to how much you can lift? And the answer is no. What does that tell you? You have infinite strength within you. And that's a remarkable fact. And that's why it's kind of sad when people limit themselves. I just can't do math. Right? That's obviously complete nonsense. Math is just a skill. It's broken down into various pieces. If you tried your best to solve a problem, and every time you tried a new approach, the more approaches you try, the more ideas you get, the more possibilities arise in your mind. And so you see then, how can a being with infinite intelligence not be able to do math? How can a being that's infinitely strong be unable to lift a certain weight? How can a being that is infinitely fast fail to run a race really quickly? How can a being that's infinitely creative fail to create a painting or write a book? And once you see things from this perspective, you realize that really there is no limit to how far you can go. The only limit is your own mind telling you that, I can only run this fast. I can only think this hard. I can only solve these kinds of problems. I can't really control my emotions. All of that is nonsense. And that's what this verse is getting at here, is that the Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. All right, let's move on to the next stanza. That was a pretty long explanation. It is hidden, but always present. I don't know who gave birth to it. It is older than God. Okay, he's talking about the Tao again here, is that it is hidden, but always present. I mean, the Tao is something you can't really describe, right? You could give some things some properties that it has, but you can't really grasp it in its entirety. So, for instance, we talked before about the Tao. You could think of the Tao as darkness. Darkness seems to have infinite possibilities. Darkness is the sort of thing that you can't really grasp. We can have maybe some basic understanding, but the darkness is pure mystery, right? But you see, even when we have a room filled with light, you get the sense that there's still darkness in the background. That is, the darkness is hidden, but it's always there. If you go to a room that's dark and you turn on the light, okay, there's light in the room. But has the darkness disappeared? No, the darkness is just hidden under the light. But it's always present. It's hidden, but it's always present. And that's the same with your true nature, who you truly are. When you stay silent and you just don't think and you realize who you truly are, well, who you are is always present. It's hidden in the sense that nobody can tell you who you are. You can't describe who you are in a phrase or in sentences or in words. But who you are is always present. Who you are is always with you. It's hidden, but it's always present. So, yeah, this is pretty, I don't know if it's making sense, but that's what it's getting at here. And the next part says, I don't know who gave birth to it. That's the Tao. It is older than God. So this is again talking about how mysterious the Tao is, how mysterious the life force is, that which animates life, the darkness, the void, infinite creativity, infinite strength. It's so bizarre. One can ask, well, how old is it? How old is the Tao? It's saying here that it's older than God. Okay, I don't know if you believe in God. That's not the point. Well, I mean, for a moment, just indulge the idea of a God. Okay, so, I mean, from the many traditions, it said that God created the entire world. Okay, let's suppose you believe that. God created the entire world. Well, in particular, God also created time. Well, if you created time, it means you exist before time. Right? So how old is if something existed before time, how old is it? And then now to make it even more mysterious, it's saying that, look, the Tao is older than God. So the Tao is older than something that existed before time. Well, how old is that? Right? That's a complete mystery. And that's the point of this verse, is that the Tao, the life force, who you are as a person, is something that is so mysterious that you cannot describe it. Even just the question, how old are you? It's not how old you've been on the planet. That question is also a mystery. Since you have a piece of the Tao in you, it means that you are timeless. That's what it's saying. And this is weird stuff. It might not make any sense to you. And if you try to grasp it, you never really grasp what it means. But it begins to give you an idea of who you are as a person. Because, as I was mentioning before, who you are is not your name. Like, for instance, okay, fine. When I was born, I was given a name. This guy is called Christian Mojaiso, okay? I was told, okay, Christian Mojaiso was born in Congo. Christian Mojaiso is an African. Christian Mojaiso is a man. Christian Mojaiso studies math. Christian Mojaiso is a teacher. Christian Mojaiso is a thinker. But these are all stories. These are all things that they said I was. This is trying to capture who I am in terms of a name, Christian Mojaiso, what I do, where I went to school, what I believe, what my talents are. But this is a delusion. This is a story. It's all made up. Christian Mojaiso is an illusion. Your name is not who you are. Your name is a fiction. It's a creation. And there are many things that come with this fiction. Maybe your name is John. Maybe, okay, they told you are called John at birth. Then they tell you, oh yeah, John is not very smart, or John can't do algebra. John can run, but not that fast. John is really timid. John can't control his emotions. These are old stories. This is someone trying to define who you are in terms of a story. But you see, this is bullshit. Who you are can never be captured in using a few sounds, like a vocal, the sounds John now. Who you are cannot be captured by where you went to school. How powerful you are cannot be captured by how much weight you can lift right now. And this is really important. Once you realize that who you thought you are is really a fiction, then true transformation begins. Because from that space, you realize, one, if John is a fiction, why not take over the fiction? Okay. They said John was timid. Well, you could change the story. John is strong. John is bold. They said John can't think. Well, you change the story. John is a great thinker. Okay. They said John can't maintain relationships. No. John can maintain relationships. It's just a story, and you're not the story. The greatest delusion is to believe the story they told you are. You are not that story. What you are is something, a piece of the Tao, if you like. You're something that cannot be captured in a few words. You can't be captured using a name. You can't be captured using a phrase or personality type. Oh yeah, John is conscientious. Conscientious is not who you are. You cannot be captured in a few phrases, in a few personality types. That's how powerful, that's how great you are. And part of the goal of this podcast is to help you to realize who you are. Because you are born to do something on the planet. There are problems in the world that you are born to solve. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to solve these problems if you do not realize who you truly are. And that's my job, is to, obviously I can't realize for you who you are. I can't help you to realize who you are. All I can do is present you with ideas, present you with concepts, consistently do my best to give you ideas that will enable you to discover for yourself who you truly are. And once you grasp the power, the greatness that is you, you realize that there is nothing that's really impossible for you. Right? You can tackle any problem. You could do the impossible. And in particular, you could solve problems that humanity is facing right now. And I've been mentioning a lot, there are many such problems. We have a problem of hunger. there are people dying of starvation. Is it possible to reach a point where there's no starving human? People will tell you, no, that's not possible. But why not? Where is the law of nature that says we can't reach a point where there's no one starving on the planet? It seems like a big problem, and it is. But you have within you the capacity to solve that problem. There are many people right now who are poorly educated. There are people in the world who are illiterate. There are many people who don't have a shot on an education. Solving the education problem of the world, that's a big problem. But you have within you the capacity to solve it. Okay? There are diseases that have gone unsolved for a long time. HIV, where people die of HIV all the time. We have Alzheimer's. We have cancer. It's been centuries that people haven't come up with solutions to these diseases. Does it mean that solutions do not exist? Am I saying that you are the sort of person that there are things you can do to become the sort of person that can solve these problems? Yes, that's what I'm saying. And once you realize who you truly are, you realize that nothing is really outside of your possibilities, your realm of possibilities. Right now we are stuck on one planet. Can we move to other planets? Can we move to another galaxy? Yes, right. There is no law of nature so far that we know that says this is not possible. And so long as we don't have a law of nature telling us something is impossible, well, we believe it's possible. And that's what's exciting, is that you can do these things. You can solve these problems. And that's what I wake up in the morning to do, is give you the mindset. Actually, I can't give you the mindset. All I can do is present you with ideas. You discover the mindset for yourself. You discover who you truly are. And then you solve the problems, and you take us all. You take us to a place we've never been. And you push the human race forward. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast episode. If you have any obstacles that are stopping you from realizing your true potential, if you have any questions about being relentless, about dying empty, please let me know. That is what I live to do, is to do the best I possibly can to enable you to discover for yourself the mindset that you need to have in order to realize your true potential and die empty. Thank you once again for listening, and have a relentless week. Bye.